Welcome to the show, this the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.
What is up, you guys? Teller checking in for Dana White's Contender Series Week 3. Fortunately enough, I'm getting this video out to you guys nice and early. I do plan on getting all these Dana White's Contender Series episodes up in advance of the weekend before the fight card. So hopefully, again, moving forward, you'll get these videos typically on a Friday like this one is here. This card right here, in my opinion, breaking down tape upon these 10 fighters, I feel that this card is filled with some of the most talent that we've seen on a Dana White's Contender Series card. Of course, headlined by Beau, Nicol. A lot of you guys are familiar with him. An NCAA Division I champion wrestler, a guy that's been well known for helping train some of the best mixed martial artists in the game, in the wrestling department. But of course, over the past couple of years, he has been making that transition to try to become an MMA star himself. So of course, headlined by him. But I've been pretty pleased with breaking down tape on all these fighters. Now, I will say the Paulo, Renato Jr. and Jamal Poigies, the tape I was able to pull up on them was a little bit more limited, although we did have the previous fight that Jamal had on Dana White's Contender Series. But besides that, it was a little bit more limited. But the other 3 fights, including the main event, also those 4 fights, I was able to pull up ample tape. So if you guys are new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. Please like this video. Catch me on all my social media platforms, MMA Fortune Teller _ for Instagram, and for Twitter, the MMA Teller. I appreciate you guys. Go follow me over there, and we'll jump right into today's episode now. Starting things off, we have 2 talented strawweight fighters looking to get a contract in the UFC. Sandra Lovato taking on Karolina Wójcik. Both women have only tasted defeat twice as far as their professional resumes go. Do take note, though, although it looks like Sandra has a little bit of an edge with the experience, having 2 more fights, that's not necessarily the case. Karolina has 9 amateur fights under her resume, where I really couldn't pull up any type of amateur fights from Sandra's side of things. And another thing that I did like seeing under Karolina's resume is that on the amateur scene, she's battled with some legit fighters like Corey McKenna, etc. Something that was pretty interesting or pretty funny to see. You could pull it up on YouTube. If you guys didn't already see this, Karolina, she did fight Cheyenne Vlismas, and they had a little run-in at the stare downs where Wójcik kind of got in her face, kind of puckered up, almost gave her a little kiss there, and Cheyenne was not liking that. And they went to war when they were inside the octagon, or excuse me, inside the cage. It was really an entertaining fight. You could pull that fight up on YouTube, and it ended up being a split decision victory for Cheyenne. We know that Cheyenne is a legit fighter. I mean, that girl is an animal. If you guys know what I mean there. But she really is an animal. And, so that split decision loss there. And then she also had a split decision loss against Ewelina Wozanak. If you pull up this split decision loss that she took against the Mad Queen, a fellow Polish fighter, she is 7-1 with her only loss being way of Maria Silva, who is an undefeated fighter who is going to be fighting on Dana White's Contender Series this upcoming season as well. So she's a highly touted prospect. So just understand that the women that Wójcik has battled in there with as a pro, the 2 losses, they look like they're legit losses, if that makes sense. You guys know what I'm talking about there. Sandra Lovato, on the other hand, fighting much lesser of talent over there. In my opinion, if you pull up the resumes of the fighters she's been in there with, a little bit of lower level competition. She's looked good, though. She's pulled off a good amount of submissions in there. And really, when you pull up tape on her and you're breaking down tape from the fights that are up, her striking is actually pretty competent. Her striking is decent. She knows what she's doing there. So you mix that all up and you have a pretty decently well-rounded fighter going into this fight. From a size standpoint, we don't have a height and reach on Sandra, but I'm willing to bet she is the taller fighter here. With Karolina only being 5'2", I think Sandra's probably like 5'4". I'm kind of guessing there, but I expect her to be like 5'4" with like a 64-inch reach. I expect her to be more lengthy. We'll see if we get that here going into the fight, and we'll see if I'm right about that, but she definitely seems more lengthy there. Karolina is aggressive though. She does close the distance. She's very aggressive. She throws big shots with her hands. She's decently well-rounded as well. And again, if you pull up the tape on her, pull up that Cheyenne fight, she went to war in that fight, had some success with takedowns here and there. She looks like she knows how to wrestle a little bit, and she has some pop in her shots in the hands. She's a fun woman to watch, and I think that this is a close fight. I really do. I think this has all the makings of being a split decision victory for either woman, but I am going to edge Karolina. I like the experience that she's had in there with some legit fighters, and I think that she's just a little bit more primed for this spot where I still want to see a little bit more from Sandra. I think Sandra might have that finesse edge, but I think Karolina might be just a little bit more brute and wild in there, and it might pay some dividends inside the cage. Maybe she edges that split decision. I will take her to win the fight, the Polish assassin. We'll pull up the betting line on this fight. Where you will see, actually, surprisingly enough, Karolina Wójcik is a -260 with the comeback on Sandra at +190. I feel like that line is a little off. I think this fight plays out closer. From a betting standpoint, I think the value is much more on Sandra, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see that line close a little bit. But I do like Karolina to win the fight straight up. But I think, again, the value is more so on Sandra, and I really wouldn't want to do too much with Karolina at a -260 line. Now, again, we're getting these videos out to you guys earlier, so we will have a lot of line movement, most likely with a lot of these fights, leading up from the week before going in to early next week. So maybe that gap closes there a little bit. So, depending on if you want to hold off and then try to get Karolina at a better line, or you feel like you're getting really good value on Sandra, this fight has the makings of being a close fight, in my opinion. Let's see how it goes. So in the intro, I talked about being pleasantly surprised with the level of talent throughout this card. As you guys can tell, I was pretty pleased with the first two women we talked about, and I was as well when we're talking about these two men here in the flyweight division. You guys know the flyweight division has been on my radar now for some time. Both of these guys are going to be more added talent to the division. We've been seeing high-level opponents come through the show in this division. Just last week, we had, what's his name, Shannon Ross, I believe his name was. I know he lost that fight to the very talented Brazilian. Both those guys are great additions to the division. I think both of these men right here have the ability to be two promising fighters in the division as well. Clayton Carpenter, 5-0 as a pro, undefeated. Edgar Cháirez, 8-3 as a pro. Both these men only 26 years old. They're both very young, which is a great thing to see. I love seeing fighters that are starting to hit their stride at a young age. If they get the contract to the UFC, there's a lot of time to watch these guys put on some great shows in the future. So you're going to see that Cháirez has a 2-inch height advantage. We don't have reach on either men. We'll talk about Clayton Carpenter real quick. As you see him over here with the Matrix, Kyle. Excuse me here, my name slipping my mind, but you guys know I'm talking about. Kyle. Why is his name slipping my mind, man? This is the guy that's brought money in. Kyler Phillips, excuse me there, guys. Just a brain fart. You guys know Kyler Phillips over at the MMA Lab, as legit as it comes. Well, interestingly enough, Carpenter definitely has some of those Kyler Phillips vibes, 100%. He goes out there, he's diverse on the feet. He's looking to end the fight on the feet. I was very pleased with breaking down tape on him. I recommend that you guys pull up some of his fights on YouTube. He's had some battles in LFA. I've seen him go out there and completely steamroll some of his opponents early and quick too. One fight that you could pull up on YouTube that I know that was very impressive. I do believe it was the Rodney Kealohi fight. That was the Kealohi fight where he hit him with that head kick, was just bombarding him with his boxing early, just ran up on him, rushed him, and mixed in a head kick. It was pretty devastating. Other than that, showing that he has some tricks up his sleeve, pulling off the knee bar, pulling off a decision, showing that he can go the distance as well. Another head kick victory and pulling off a rear naked choke. As far as just 5 fights go, this is a solid resume. He shows a little bit of everything. And when you actually, again, when you watch him on tape, he really does show a little bit of everything. He's talented. So I've been pretty high on him. And you like the fact that he's been battling over in LFA. You know, LFA is a very respected promotion as far as making your way up to the UFC. His opponent, check this out. His opponent, Edgar Cháirez, what was just about as impressive to me as Clayton. Was extremely impressed with him. This guy is a talented fighter, very technical on the feet, carries some serious power, seems to be decently well-rounded as well. We'll get to that in a second. Decently well-rounded. You know, he does have a couple losses on his resume, which we will pull up. He does have those 3 losses and only 11 fights. And we take a look at those losses real quick. You know, this was the fight that I was referring to. 2 of them, in fact. You know, he was submitted twice. Submitted by Jesus Santos Aguilar. That was in the 5th round. And a grueling fight. Got caught in that guillotine choke. And then was also caught up in that triangle armbar in the 2nd round. So showing that at times he's lacking a little bit defensively down on the mat, but you know he's going to continue to evolve. Like I said, he's young. He carries some serious power on the feet. He's a nasty striker, and I think that these men have great potential to slug it out on the feet. I think this is another fight that could play out closely. They're both very talented. I would not be surprised in the least bit if Edgar shows up and makes this a battle. Now, let's also remember, just last week, a heavily favored flyweight fighter did drop his fight. Of course, I do feel that fight was a little bit different on paper going into it. Ross was respected. He had a lengthy resume. He's a well-rounded veteran in the sport. I think it was a little bit more of a fade on his opponent, who we then found out is pretty talented. But going into this fight, where you're going to see Carpenter is a hefty favorite, right around -310, I think that is a little bit more in regards to people respecting the potential that a guy like Clayton Carpenter has. He's brutal on the feet. He's well-rounded. And I really think that a lot of people consider him to be a blue-chip prospect. The problem I have with this line, as you'll see, Edgar Cháirez is a +225. The problem I have with it is that Cháirez seems to check off a lot of boxes, but most importantly, he's dangerous on the feet. And if this fight does play out on the feet, again, I'll reference that fight that we just saw take place on last week's episode in the flyweight division. You get 2 guys throwing down. Edgar Cháirez is more than live to not only land a big shot, but I think that he's live even to potentially get the better of the striking exchanges if the fight, as the fight plays out. I think that there's that type of potential. Saying all that, I still have been more impressed with Clayton Carpenter, and I'm going to pick him here. But I would think that line should be more at like a -230, 240. Off the limited amount of information that we have, the limited amount of tape. It's not like we have lengthy resumes on these guys, especially Carpenter. Even Carpenter, only 5 professional fights, but the promise is there. So I will pick Clayton Carpenter to get the job done, and I'm gonna go by way of finish. I think he gets this. I think he gets the job done one way or another. Maybe even more so via a sub. Maybe he hurts Edgar, gets the fight down to the mat, and pulls off a tricky sub. We've seen that he's diverse with his finishing abilities, and Edgar Cháirez has been finished via sub 2 different ways in only his 11 professional fights. But just be aware that Edgar is game, and on the feet, he definitely poses a threat. This is a fight that you don't want to miss. Now, this fight's taking place in the featherweight division. If you guys did your own homework, I don't know if you guys caught the same type of vibes that I did. Both men very big for the featherweight division. Anvar Boynazarov, fighting out of Uzbekistan, taking on Erik Silva, the Venezuelan fighter, not to be confused with the former UFC fighter Erik Silva, who has the C in his name, the Brazilian fighter who was once a high-rising fighter, but really fell off a cliff, if you guys remember him, and a fighter that I think was a little bit of a product, or of the product of USADA, the way his career fell off, if you guys remember who I'm talking about there. A guy that was going in steamrolling fighters early, and then all of a sudden was prone to being finished and just seemed to be a little bit of a different fighter. But, you know, back to this fight here. Again, another fight where I was pleasantly surprised and breaking down tape on both fighters. Anvar Boynazarov, the Uzbekian fighter, 3-0 as a pro in MMA, but has the experience over in the kickboxing game. A fighter that has, in fact, experience kickboxing over in Glory, which you guys know, Glory kickboxing, pretty much the cream of the crop as far as that goes. Slide through his resume. Now, his kickboxing record is not the best, and his Muay Thai fights, as far as the resume goes with his Muay Thai fights, it's not the best. But do understand We're talking about legit striking abilities one way or another. I don't care if he's going 500 in those fights. He has that kickboxing background. He's going to be above a lot of MMA fighters that he fights in that aspect on the feet. And when you break down tape on him, that is the case. That's definitely the case. And you see him working on his grappling here. But if you pull up his fights on YouTube, which you can pull up a couple of them, he was devastating in some of them, really going out there, just brutalizing some of his opponents. There was one fight that he had with the fellow where I really felt bad for the guy. He was just a fish out of water, had nothing for him on the feet, and Anvar went in there and did what he should have did and was just chopping his legs down. And in fact, he finished that fight via leg kicks. So understand that he has a brutal leg kicking game. Silva here, you see Silva working his jiu-jitsu. Silva definitely has the edge as far as the grappling goes. We got to give him the edge there. He's shown that he has gone out time and time again and has worked his jiu-jitsu over on the MMA side of things. He has a more lengthy background in the MMA world with 9 professional fights. Again, with Anvar only having those 3 professional fights. Erik Silva, I'll run you through his resume real quick. 8-1 as a pro. Pulling off 3 rear naked chokes in a row. 4 rear naked chokes in a row. Submitting guys with as much as experience as 24 professional fights. Guys with 18 professional fights. I mean, these are guys that are not just in there that don't know what they're doing. And respectable resumes as well. Will at least give his opponent stats. So, I mean, he's going in there, he's pulling off rear naked chokes 4 times in a row, all in the first round. I think it's clear that he knows what he's doing down on the mat. And again, if you break down the tape on him, you'll see that he knows what he's doing. One thing that I noticed about Erik Silva is that he's actually polished up on the feet as well. He's a good striker. He's a good striker. I think he's a well-rounded fighter. I'm interested to see how the striking exchanges take place. Based on the fact that his opponent is a high-level striker, I'm really curious to see if Silva is able to hang with him there. In a lot of his fights on the feet, he's been very comfortable and has been working guys there as well. So I really hope that we get to see that element of the fight. This is a guy that has held gold, of course, just in regional scenes in his area. Nothing major, no promotion really worth noting, in my opinion. The Lux Fight League. But again, that's something good to see. I mean, he has that championship mindset. I'm sure he's very confident in himself. And, this was a fight that I've been a little bit back and forth on. I was actually going to be picking the dog here in Anvar Boynazarov. But the more I watch tape on Erik Silva, I've been impressed with him. Like I said, he's the more well-rounded fighter. And I think that there's a more realistic avenue for him to exploit Anvar's grappling game than Anvar to be able to pull off his striking. I think I just feel more comfortable backing the fighter generally that has the more solid ground game compared to the fighter that has the better striking. I know that's a very general statement, so I don't want to just throw that out there and say that like that's fact. Is every fight's different, but in a very general statement, I would say I would lean more towards the grappler. But Erik Silva has shown promise in the feet as well, so I will pick Erik Silva to win this fight. But again, I was back and forth on my decision making there. Erik Silva is a -165 favorite with Anvar Boynazarov at +129 over on Bovada.lv right now. I think that the line's decently accurate. I think it's actually pretty much dead on in my opinion. I have it right around that. Maybe a little bit lower, but not much off. I mean, that's a pretty accurate line. I think that I would like Erik Silva here, but I wouldn't be willing to pay too much on his line. If his line starts to blow up, I would not touch it. And I would feel then that there's more value on Anvar. And maybe even slightly there's more value on him right here. Or, like I said, maybe that line is just pretty much spot on. I think that's an accurate line. So very interested to see how that fight plays out. I will pick Erik Silva based on the fact that he's the more well-rounded mixed martial artist. But do not be surprised if Boynazarov goes out there and lands a devastating knockout finish or chops the legs down and really brutalizes Erik and disables him from using his footwork and whatnot and really hinders him from being able to get the job done. But give me Erik Silva still. Now, we got an interesting fight here, essentially taking place in the co-main event slot of the card. Paulo Honato Jr. taking on Jamal Poigies. This fight taking place in the heavyweight division, which is somewhat interesting. We'll get to that in a second. We've seen Jamal Poigies on the show before. He did have a victory. He won a decision and a unanimous decision and was not awarded a contract. I guess the UFC was not that impressed with his performance there. Neither was I. Paulo Honato Jr. This is a guy that is 10-1 as a pro and has really, really fluctuated with his weight throughout his career. Paulo Honato has started off his career as a welterweight. In fact, when you pull up tape on some of his fights that are taking place in the welterweight division, I thought that's where he looked the best. Now, I'm not going to speculate and go on too much about his size because I really don't know enough about the situation. But anytime I see a fighter go from the welterweight division up to the light heavyweight division, and then just as of recently, the heavyweight division, just seems a little odd to me. We saw Anthony Johnson do this throughout his career. It actually worked out wonderful for him. But overall, I wouldn't say it's really a stable type of situation. I would think consistently you would see more so that would be detrimental to fighters' careers, in my opinion. He's only 6 foot. Jamal is definitely the more naturally larger man here. And again, Jamal Poigies actually majority of his fights in the light heavyweight division, so he's bumping up as of recently as well. I mean, but again, he is a large man. I could see him being a more suited heavyweight than a guy like Paulo. But just to kind of brush upon that weight situation there. Now, again, when we talked about Paulo, as far as his skill sets go, there was a fight that I pulled up of him where he was fighting in the welterweight division, looked very crisp, very quick with his hands. His boxing looked pretty much up to par. Then there was some other tape that I pulled up of him, more up in weight. There was a boxing match I pulled up. Definitely seemed like he was more slow. And I was a little bit skeptical of the skill set that I saw on tape when I looked at some of those fights. So I was not that impressed there. Some of those fights actually did take place a little bit earlier in his career. Was not able to pull up some of his more recent fights, which is, I want to get to that point here in a second, because keep in mind now, when these guys are getting these contracts or getting these opportunities, excuse me, to fight on the show, it's obviously because the UFC scouting department is liking what they're seeing. As of recently, he's going out there, he's finishing these fighters, coming off 3 finishes in a row. 4 of his last 5 fights are via finishing the fight. His opponents either not getting up off the stool in between rounds or knocking them out in the first round. I'm willing to bet that he looked pretty decent in those fights to get a co-main event slot again on this fight card. So maybe he's been putting it together as of recently. A guy in Jamal, we'll talk about him real quick, has experience over in the Bellator scene. He's a well-rounded fighter. I've seen him go out there, starch dudes on the feet as well. His boxing is up to par, and he is up to par with his grappling as well. He's a well-rounded fighter. I've seen him use his grappling to dominate, of course, the fight on the show. He got some takedowns, used some control time to solidify some rounds there. I think that from the limited tape I was able to pull up, I think that Jamal is the more well-rounded fighter. He's the more legitimate heavyweight. He's the more naturally larger man. And I think based on those factors, I am leaning towards Jamal's way. And I can understand why he's coming into this fight as a pretty hefty favorite. But again, just be skeptical if people are kind of low on this guy, Paulo, based on some of that early tape, and maybe he's been changing things around as of recently. He is only 28 years old. Jamal is only 26. Both men have plenty of room for growth in their game. But give me Jamal Poigies to get the job done. I could see him maybe snatching up a neck or getting on top and kind of controlling him and really nullifying Paulo, maybe gassing Paulo out. Wouldn't be surprised if we see Paulo kind of gas out with Jamal. Jamal is very defensively sound. He's not really eager to put on a brawl. I mean, he takes his time. He picks his shots. I could see him kind of slowing this fight down and dragging Paulo to deep waters, clinching on him, using his size to kind of drown him there. Wouldn't be shocked if you see that. A couple losses throughout Jamal Poigies' career. Got submitted by Alex Pelosi. We know about him over in the Bellator scene. Just got knocked out by Yoel Romero. In that fight, I believe he got a knee bar pulled off on him or some type of leg lock. So made a mistake there. But overall, Jamal actually is pretty technically sound. Give me Jamal Poigies to win the fight. And from a betting standpoint, I wouldn't necessarily feel too confident in taking him at the minus 350 line. But I understand it and I get it. Maybe I have him capped more like a minus 300 to 320. Let's see how these men look when the weigh-in comes around. here we go. Get the main event of the card. Without a doubt, the most exciting fight, just based on the fact that Beau Nicol is stepping in there. If you guys are not well versed with who Beau Nicol is, again, I'll brush upon him. He's a fighter that has worked the wrestling of some of the best MMA fighters in the game. He was one of the wrestling coaches over at American Top Team. I know Steve Mako, a big wrestling coach over there as well. But essentially, Beau Nicol was a guy that was working on a lot of top fighters at American Top Teams in regards to their wrestling. And his pro debut, he goes out there and shows that he's got some legit boxing, goes out there and starches his opponent, John Nolan, knocks him out early. And that fight was about 2 months ago. People have been anticipating him working his way to the UFC for quite a while now. And this is a fighter that we could essentially be seeing in the UFC with a 2-0 pro record, which is pretty crazy, right? We're talking about, that's like some Brock Lesnar stuff, okay? And when it came to Brock Lesnar, we know that he had the decorated wrestling background as well. I believe both men, NCAA Division I champions. You know, that's a legit pedigree. But Brock Lesnar was doing it in the heavyweight division back then, you know, years ago. There was, first off, the heavyweight division's a more shallow division than the middleweight division. This was years ago when there wasn't as many men trying to work their way into the UFC. I think that this would be even more impressive to see Beau Nicol come into the UFC 2-0 and, in my opinion, go out there and start dominating UFC middleweight fighters. I think that's definitely a realistic possibility. In fact, I lean that to be what's going to be coming here. Again, just as good as Beau Nicol looked in his pro debut, that's what really not surprised me. I shouldn't say surprised me. That's what impressed me, because we already knew that he was going to have that wrestling pedigree. We knew that he was going to go in there. We know he's going to dominate guys that are not up to par with their grappling. He's going to take them down. He's going to smother them. He's going to ground and pound them. But this to me looks like a guy that's spending a couple of scraps in his day. He's comfortable with his hands. And, you know, I knew a lot of dudes that were like that, dudes that wrestled throughout high school, went on to college wrestling, but they boxed a lot more than people thought. You know, they put time in at the local gym. I had some friends that did this, and people wouldn't really know them as if they were boxers, but they had a lot of time working on their hands just for fun, just being somebody that likes to scrap or whatnot, likes to just have another element of combat sports in their back pocket. You know, they find it fun and interesting. And I think that Beau Nicol is one of those types of guys. I think he was definitely working on his hands throughout his life. I don't think that this is a guy that just is starting to pick up striking because now he wants to step in MMA. I guarantee you Beau Nicol has been hitting the pads or hitting the heavy bag for a long time. I would be willing to bet that. So real quick too, we'll pull up Beau Nicol's amateur resume, where you see that, of course, he went out there, finished both opponents as an amateur, had went in there and put out a grappling, or went in there and had a grappling affair with Gordon Ryan. You guys know Gordon Ryan, what many people believe to be the best jiu-jitsu no-gi grappler on planet Earth. I think that's pretty much a fact at this point. Gordon the King Ryan, an absolute beast. So he went in there. That just shows you that the competitive mindset that a guy like Beau has to go in there even to show up and do that. And that was back in 2019. And he was submitted, but it means absolutely nothing. In fact, this is a win there, just to go in there and be on the match with a guy like Gordon Ryan. I love that. And then 2 other grappling matches that went via draw. So whatever, it's good to see that he's continuously working on his grappling and his jiu-jitsu. And as well, of course, we know he's putting in a lot of time with his striking. Okay. So as you guys can tell, I'm a little pumped up. I'm excited to see him make his Dana White's Contender Series debut, where I do believe he's going to be getting a contract here. Now we're going to get to the line here in a second, which is pretty crazy. Beau Nicol is a minus 1,400. Okay. Now I'm sure a lot of you guys are probably thinking, you know, we got we got an amazing wrestler working his way into the MMA scene. We still think there's a possibility that he's vulnerable in fighting a guy in Zachary, Borrego, who has more MMA experience. And, you know, if he's not up to par with his striking, we could see a guy like Zachary landing a big shot and putting him out. We've seen wrestlers that are a little rocky on the feet at times. I don't see it at all. In fact, I was when I was breaking down tape on this guy, Zachary, I was like, all right, man, I see what the UFC is doing here. He's 3-0 as a pro, defeating scrubs, a guy that's 4-8, has twice as many losses as victories, a guy that's 1-1 and a guy that's 0-1 after the loss there, had no experience there. Lost 3 of his 6 amateur fights, losing to guys that were not really that impressive. But most importantly, when you break down the tape on Zachary, you'll notice that he's just not impressive there. He's clumsy in my opinion, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I don't think that he's near on the level of a guy like Beau Nicol, as far as from an athletic standpoint, as far as from a competitive standpoint. Now, if you guys have been paying attention, there's been some interviews with him. Borrego, he's very confident. He thinks he's going to go out there and starch Beau Nicol. I just do not see it happening. And the point that I'm making is the fact that Beau Nicol's a minus 1,400, of course, it has a lot to do with the wrestling pedigree and all this momentum that he has. But I think actually the more people are watching tape on Borrego, they're starting to realize that this guy is not going to be up to par. He's not going to be up for a fight with a guy like Beau Nicol. Now, I also want to point out, we talked about these 3 losses that he took over in the amateur scene. This loss that he took against Gabriel Nixon was starched, clean, knocked out in that fight. And I think that's why the UFC is picking him here, because again, it looks better on paper with the 3-0 record, but they've seen these fights, where he got choked out in the first round by Felipe Rocha and knocked out against Gabriel Nixon. They've seen these fights and they think that this is a perfect fight for Beau Nicol to make a statement and then work his way into the UFC's middleweight division, which you guys know I feel is the most shallow division in the UFC. I really do believe the UFC middleweight division is the most shallow division in the UFC. And do not be surprised when you see a guy like Beau Nicol come in this upcoming Tuesday, make a statement, get a contract, come in, win a couple fights in the UFC, and work his way to a title shot. I'm telling you guys right now, we saw what Alex Pereira just did in the division. I mean, a guy that barely has any pro experience. He just came in, wreaked a little bit of havoc, worked his way to that potential title shot. That's what it looks like on the horizon. Don't be surprised if a guy like Beau Nicol comes in, stirs the pot up, and you see his name right up in the mix as well. Letting you guys know that right now. So quite obviously, Beau Nicol is my pick here to win the main event fight. I think he definitely gets a finish in this fight. It could be via knockout. It could be via decision. It could be a knockout on the feet, just to clarify, or it could also be ground and pound down on the mat. I think he can do almost whatever he wants in this fight. I really, truly believe that. He's going to have some choices. Now, he's going to have some choices in regards to, does he want to choose the path of least resistance and go in there and get a takedown and just dominate with his ground and pound and look to pull off a sub? Or does he want to make a big statement and get that knockout on the feet, which I think he's definitely live to do as well. But of course, without a doubt, you go through a little bit more risk if you go that route. It's going to be interesting to see which route that he goes to and how he wants to go about making a statement. But nevertheless, he gets the job done. Now, from a betting standpoint, minus 1,400 is next to his name. What are you going to do with that? Obviously, you guys can tell that I'm not feeling any type of value on Zachary Borrego, even at plus 750. I think you're just throwing your money down the drain. That's how I feel about it. I just wouldn't want anything to do with that. But at the same time, minus 1,400 is a pretty ridiculous line. I mean, it's almost about as high as you'll ever see in an MMA fight. You don't really see lines get much higher than minus 1,500, minus 1,600. That's pretty ridiculous. But I understand why it's like that. I think you're better off just sitting this one out from a betting standpoint and just seeing what type of fighter Beau is and being excited for the new addition to the UFC's middleweight division. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up Dana White's Contender Series Week 3 breakdown and predictions. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the episode. Moving forward, you can expect these breakdowns for these Dana White's Contender Series cards to come at you guys more in advance, like I said. So hopefully that will benefit you guys so you can attack the lines a little bit earlier. And in general, too, you can expect my UFC breakdown videos for all cards to be out a little bit earlier, trying to step things up here. And I want to get more content out to you guys. Of course, much love to all you guys that support the channel here. For all you guys that are subscribed, you guys are liking the videos. It really helps me out. I appreciate you guys more than you'll ever know. I say that time and time again because I really do mean it. So thank you guys. And that's pretty much all. You guys will be hearing from me again here at the channel very soon. More content coming at you. Catch me on Instagram in the meantime, MMA fortune teller underscore, to stay up to date with me on a daily basis. All right, guys, signing out. Teller.
Welcome to the show. This the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.